Hello, I'm John with CodeVA, and this is a tutorial about functions and parameters with the Python programming language. Let's jump right into it. So I've got this editor up in Replit.com, and I'm going to show you how to create functions with parameters. I'll explain why you would even want to create functions with parameters, like what's the point, and hopefully give you a strong example to help explain it. So imagine for a moment that I need to create a program that administers a quiz to a person. I'm a teacher, this is something that I might want to have a computer do. I don't know. So let's start writing that. So first I'd have the computer output a question, right? Like, what is the capital of Virginia? That's a good question for quiz. And then I need to have the computer store the user's answer in a variable. And then I might use like an if statement to have the computer tell the user if they got the question right or wrong. Pretty straightforward. So if the user's answer is equal to Richmond, because Richmond's the capital of Virginia, then I'll print like a nice affirmative message. And if they got it wrong, if they didn't say Richmond, if the user doesn't enter the word Richmond and the answer variable doesn't have the word Richmond stored in it, then the user is incorrect. Great. This is my little quiz. I'm just going to test this real quick, make sure everything's working correctly. So, what's the capital of Virginia? Type Richmond. Great. And I should also test the other side of it, right? Let's type something else. Washington, D.C. Right. Okay. Everything's working appropriately. Now, what would I have to do in order to create a second question? Well, pretty straightforward. All I have to do is take all my code. I'll copy all of it, throw it down here, and then after that if statement, I'll have the computer ask a different question, like what is the capital of New York, state of New York? Then I have to go in and change the correct answer, right? Because the state of New York isn't Richmond, it's Albany. And the rest of it is the same. I don't have to change that line. That line will be the same. I can just discard the old answer value. This line is the same, except for the city. And then the messages will be the same too. So a lot of this code is repeated, right? Let me remove some line space so we can see. It's like in two chunks. And the chunks are mostly the same, except that we have different questions and have written different if statement relational expressions. And this gets us our quiz, right? If I go and take it, say Richmond, and then I'll say New York City is my incorrect answer, right? Oh, my quiz works great. Still works awesome. But here's a problem. What if I had to do like 100 quizzes? I could absolutely copy and paste the same code 100 times, and that would be okay, right? Like there's nothing wrong with that. The computer wouldn't complain. But that might make it really hard for me to change things and edit things. And also my code be really long. That's also problematic. I'd have to scroll a lot. That's sort of annoying. And maybe the worst part about it is that most of the code is the same as between questions. I'm not going to have to change a lot. It's like drudgery, right? Now, what you already know, if you've done stuff with functions before, is that functions can help with repetition. Functions allow us to give a name to a sequence of code, and then we can have the computer repeat that sequence of code over and over again by using that sequence's name. We can do the same thing, but with the added benefit of parameters. Just to make this a little bit more clear, I'm going to edit this just a little bit. Imagine that we were using variables for the parts of the question that change when we repeat. Actually, let me put this back. Okay, so instead of having the text of the question there, I'll use the word question, and then I'll store my value there, and then I have another value that will change. Make a second variable. And this is just for demonstration purposes. Obviously, like adding variables here doesn't change the way the code works. Instead of reading my string, the computer will read the value of the variable. And that's not any different, really. But now if I did the same thing down here, what you'll notice now I have two completely identical sequences of code. And all I have to do to make this work is change the value of the variables. Right? Two identical sequences of code. This is a good candidate for a function, right? Because I'm using the same sequence of code twice. But the problem is I have to change the variables each time, and I can't change variables in a function. I can't replace values of variables that are defined in a function. Like if I do, let's do it like this. Make a function for my repeated code. If I put the variable assignment inside the function, well, that's problematic because every time I call the ask question function, the computer is going to ask the same question, right? Even if I call it multiple times, there's nothing I can do to change the value of those variables because they're baked into the function definition, right? But here's the new thing. What parameters let us do is they let us define variables to use in a function, not at the top of the function, but rather when I call the function. So I need to make two changes. First, I'm going to create variables inside the parentheses up here. So I'll have my variable question, which I'm using on line 2, and then the variable correct answer, correct answer, which I'm using on line 4. Make that a little bit more compact so you can see it. Two variables separated by a comma. Now these variables don't have any values, right? I'm not giving any values to these variables. So how can I use them in the code? Well, I'm going to give those variables values on line 10. These are called parameters. They're special variables that I, as the programmer, get to define the value of when I call the ask question function. So on line 10, I'm giving the parameter called question a value of this string. And I'm giving the parameter correct answer this value. And now, when the computer runs the sequence of code, it's going to insert the values I've passed into the function and use them in the program. Pretty great. And the best thing about this is that when I call the function again, I can actually pass different values. Now, watch. One function, two function calls, passing different parameters. And watch. Get my Virginia question. And I get my New York question. I have reduced the amount of code that I need to write because now I have one function that I can call multiple times. And if I want to have 100 more questions, I just have to add 100 more lines. That's functions with parameters. It's a super powerful concept. This is kind of a simplistic example, but there's so much that is useful about this. You're definitely going to come back to this in the future. If you have any questions about these concepts, need some help, get in the comments below, or we'd love to hear from you. Otherwise, good luck and happy coding.